If you record audio for any purpose, chances are you want it to be heard. You want to attract the largest audience possible who can hear your message. That's where we come in. We're cyberears.com, a revolutionary internet service that will host your audio files and help you promote and track its popularity. Considering hosting a podcast to the world? We have all the automated tools to make the process as simple and easy as it can be. No technical mumbo-jumbo to work out. Cyberears.com does all the work for you. You record it, we take care of the rest. So don't delay. Go to cyberears.com today and register for a free trial account. Upload your audio files and get heard. With cyberears.com, it's your audio on your terms.
Hi, this is Bill Burns from UFO Magazine and UFO Hunters. You know, there are several ways that you can get UFO Magazine.
Yeah, we know, Bill. We know. Just shut up. Just give us one way. Don't tell us you're psychic and, give it 8,000 phone numbers and take 15 minutes of our time when we just want to hear the show. Just tell us how we can get UFO Magazine in one way.
Okay. Just go to www.ufomag.com, subscribe online. You happy?
Yeah, was that so hard?
Actually, harder than you know.
So the Jeff.
So the Jer. How are you?
It begins.
It does indeed.
The countdown to premium.
Well, it's not really a countdown. This is pretty much it.
Oh, right. Well, the countdown in days.
Well, countdown in minutes for this show, anyway.
Yeah, when will people be able to actually subscribe to that? Today, as this airs?
Yeah, I plan on putting the subscriber page up on the website as the show airs, probably late Friday night, so that way through the weekend you'll be able to go and subscribe. And there's a bonus part to this in that the subscriber area of the site looks nothing like the above ground area of the site.
People are already thrilled by whatever that means. No, it actually looks beautiful. You've done a fantastic job. Thanks.
And it's going to be neat. So that'll be live late Friday night. I think I'll pull the trigger on it and just let it fly.
Very nice. So what brings us together this fine day on our last of the completely free shows? What do we want to do here? What would you like to do? Air out our ufological closets?
Why not?
All right.
I say. What's yours? Go ahead.
Mine? Get mine over with, huh?
You got anything?
Well, let's see. As we all know, I think, the issue of UFO Magazine with my cover story on Emma Woods comes out this week, or maybe early next week. So that ought to be. I'll be interested to see what the feedback is on that. I know now Emma has actually written me and said that there is a French researcher who had written to her and said he can't wait to get his hands on the article to read it and disseminate it amongst his ufological colleagues. We'll see what that means for all of Europe, who I'm friends with.
Jesus.
A little Greer for you.
Thanks.
Yeah. So, but it's just interesting because the more I look into Bud Hopkins, the more of David Jacobs type stuff I see, and then I feel like, gee, do we need to start doing an expose on him? Like, where does this stuff end in terms of is one enough? Do we get it, or do you have to just keep taking it to people to try to find the truth? And then if you do that, then do you become that guy? Oh, that guy doesn't care. He just wants to take people down and make a name for himself.
Well, I think in terms of the whole regression hypnotherapy thing, as it applies to the abduction research thing, I think. How much more do you need to hear than Lilienfeld? I mean, I didn't need to hear. I mean, not that Emma Woods' story wasn't exemplary for what we were talking about, but I mean, what more do you need than what Scott came on the show and said?
People apparently need it. I mean, there's
people
they apparently trying to hold on.
Yeah. But you got to realize, I think it's at a certain point, don't you just realize that it is wish fulfillment and people have a hard time letting go of a preconceived notion that seems to fit or make sense to them, in some kind of way? Like, are they really after the truth or are they just after something else? They want to be able to get their heads around it, but how do you do that and hang on to something that clearly is a faulty practice. You don't. You can't. I think people eventually will let go of that the more that they read themselves and the more that they see themselves. Because like I said, I don't think Emma Woods is going to be the only one to come forward and say, "Hey."
The thing, she's not the only one. And when I had said that before, it was because she had told me about a few other people who wanted to remain anonymous in terms of Jacobs. But I have since learned of, from multiple sources, people who have left Bud Hopkins' support groups. In fact, one woman who believed that she was impregnated by aliens and have all those memories, and just woke up one day and said, "You know what, this is bull. I feel as though I was pressured into believing this by the group." And,
wow.
And, that on top of her own just personal, whatever your own psychological issue is that you would do that in the first place, be pressured into a false memory. Right. And she's not the only one either. I've heard of several other people. So it's like I keep hearing about these people from credible sources. And it looks like, so for these guys, Hopkins and Jacobs, to come forward and go, well, Emma's the only one, this doesn't happen, is complete and utter nonsense, and they know it. How does that need to be exposed? Do I need to track these people down and try to get them to talk, or do we just not care? Do you get it at this point, people?
Well, no, I think it would be good to hear. And this is not, it's not about vendetta. It's not about any of that. It's about,
but it'll be perceived
there's a problem here, and that problem. Well, I don't care. Sunlight's the best disinfectant. That's the facts here. There's clearly some sort of a practice going on here that number one has no psychological merit as far as that community is concerned. Scott clearly made that obvious to us. And so, what do you do? You've got to get more people involved in speaking and saying, "I felt pressured. I didn't feel this. I didn't remember that." We expose them to the Lilienfeld show. Let them listen to that, and then let that sink in for a week, and then have them on the show. See if anything that he said in the course of our discussion with him that makes sense to what now they're understanding, because they're out of that. That festering place. They're out of that kind of mode. And now that they're out, can they look back based on what Dr. Lilienfeld said on the show and compare it and go, yeah, you know what? I did actually feel that way. I did actually see this in practice. This is disturbing to me. That's disturbing to me.
Yeah, I just hope people are able to look at side by side the credentials and the records of a Scott Lilienfeld against anyone who's saying, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater in terms of hypnosis. And just ask yourself, are these both of equal value opinions? I think people can do that, but then I don't know, because ufology just tends to throw everyone at you at the same time and says, look, everything's equal, everything's valid.
Well, the other thing is that everyone, this subject does have a tendency to make you examine the minute and not step back from the bigger picture and really assess what is actually going on. There was I'm on the UFO updates list with a lot of people, a lot of the named people around town, and just today, there was this big sighting in New York City of what we now know was a accidental let go of some Mylar balloons, and it caused a big stir over New York, and it's been a big story on there. And a gent today posts up a still. Now follow me with this. A still from the internet from CBS, who obtained it from God knows where, right? Mm-hmm. So he's comparing these three, dots of light in a clear New York City sky, right? Blue day, major sunlight, all of that. And he blows them up to just an incomprehensible photograph and says, "I'm seeing something in here." What? What are you talking about? First of all, what kind of camera? What kind of optics? What CCD chip? What manufacturer? Where was this shot from? What time? Where did you obtain it? CBS? Did you do a screen grab on a video that's already been compressed and put up online? And and I made the statement, this piece of footage that you're banking so much on, saying, I can't dismiss, this is something anomalous. We can't buy into this balloon theory, hook, line, and sinker right now. Well, yeah, you can, because you got nothing else to go on. And this is what you're presenting is not it. It's taking a step back and going, okay, we've got a school here celebrating something, and somebody lost a whole massive amount of Mylar balloons. Okay, well,
Were they Mylar balloons, or were they just regular old balloons?
I think they said they were some sort of opalescent. They were probably Mylar, likely. From what I'm hearing, but grouped together and then some apart. I mean, I think the last report that I read said something about 40 of them were, they let loose of them somehow just by accident, and that's what happened. Whether it was accident or intentional is irrelevant. The fact of the matter is this guy's putting up some inferior picture that is not even remotely from the genuine source, but rather passed around like a whore on Saturday night and then analyzed by him to say, I see something here. And you're not seeing anything more than artifacts of the camera, artifacts of blowing it up far beyond its its intended viewing area, and trying to make a mountain out of a molehill. It speaks to the same guy now who is taking UFO footage and blowing it up and then pixelating it to such a massive degree and then trying to pick out shapes of little green men with antennas, Nanu. Fuckhead. I mean, that's the same thing. It's trying to make sense of data that doesn't provide you anything of use to even start examining. But it was pretty clear to step back from that issue. You can look at it with a fresh face and not your ufological face. Let's look at this in a rational way and say, okay, here's this. No flight characteristics were unusual. I mean, so far I've emailed back and forth and spoke on the phone with 5 people up there who have seen something, 3 of which contacted me directly. And I said, did they exhibit anything unusual as far as flight? Well, no, they just kind of got tinier and tinier until they were gone, but they sparkled a couple of times and they seemed to shimmer in the light. Look like balloons to you? And 4 out of the 5 people said, yeah, I think it was balloons. Only one of them, a young lady up there, said, no, I don't know. It seems weird. It seemed weird to me. And, I'm inclined to say, yeah, it's balloons. But when you've got your UFO goggles on so tight that you can't get them off and take a step back, that's where the problems start.
Well, here's a question for you about that. As I had posted footage from East El Paso of something that the news people themselves had captured on film, and they were saying, we don't know what this is, and they were comparing it to the New York footage. And they're like, take a look at the formation, and it's kind of similar, all this nonsense, and we don't know what this is. We contacted airport, and they said that there were some show planes, and we asked them what group, and they couldn't tell us. Mysterious. And then they left it at that.
Right.
And then I had asked you, could this be planes? And that becomes the narrative, right? Could this really be planes? Well, the answer is it's not planes. It's this group of parachutists that have a pyro display attached to their ankles. And they do a night show, and they were doing a test run, and there's footage of it, and you can see it, and yeah, it's the same freaking thing. So it's not planes, but it is this other non-anomalous thing. Right. So right there, okay, that's all destroyed. Now, I say that to certain friends in this UFO business, and their answer is, yeah, but it's still good because the media is now putting it out there, and they're treating it semi-seriously. So even if it turns out to be a mundane thing, they're implanting the suggestion that this stuff is real and that it's okay. It's like a slow creep into acceptance. Like, to what end would that even be good? Well, of course, if there's a Galactic Federation waiting for us, then it's a way to ease us into that, blah, blah, blah. But do you even buy the premise that it's okay and or beneficial in some way to put out a bunch of bogus stories? I mean, this is something that they could have done, I don't know, a little more investigative reporting on and figured out that it was not show planes, but indeed parachutists? I mean, do you think that any coverage is good, even when it's explainable?
No, I don't. No, I don't. And here's why. And it's the exact same reason I gave the gentleman on the list about when it came to New York. I said, unfortunately, when you put a story out like that as a news service and you make it, even if you treat it seriously, which all due credit to taking it somewhat seriously and going, what is this? Let's not forget at the beginning of the El Paso footage that you saw on YouTube, which is residing on our message board right now. I think the male reporter starts out by saying, well, here's what everyone's been waiting for. Right? Yeah. So that means it's the last news story of the night. They've kept you around watching the news for that last human interest story, which they always do. That's likely what it was about to start with. But treating it seriously is one thing. That's fine. Okay, I understand that point. The problem is, as I said to the list today, to spend time on this when an answer is there, when the possibility of an answer is there, or it doesn't take very much effort to do this, to continue to harp and go, I'm not quite willing to accept this, is yet what I see for that all being is yet another place for the fundamental skeptics to go, you see how this works? They want to believe this. It doesn't matter what it is. They want to believe it. We've got balloons here and we've got skydivers here, and they're still crying UFOs. It's just another opportunity to leave yourself open to be marginalized both as the field as a whole and the people in it. That's what I see it being useful for. That's what it's good for. It's good for them.
Right. Do you want to get into what you've been battling about on this list and with whom and all of that?
Yeah, I mean, there's not been any battle lately. I mean, and this goes back to some topic that we've covered, well, a lot probably on this show, and that's this whole notion of the ETH, the extraterrestrial hypothesis, and the resistance to it within the field. And I was telling Jeremy that
resistance to the hypothesis.
The resistance to alternate theories to the hypothesis or alternate theories in general. I mean, we talked a lot about when we were at the X conference and you stood up and asked at the X conference, how do we know this is extraterrestrial? What other explanations are there? We're building this whole infrastructure of diplomacy and disclosure upon what exactly? What proof do we have that this is extraterrestrial? Not saying there wasn't a phenomena. And we told everybody then about the reaction you got from the crowd, which was, what are you here for? And all of that. And I was over at UFO Iconoclasts, which is Rich Reynolds' board. And I don't even remember what the story was. I think it might have had to do something about Stanton Friedman. And, everybody was pretty much saying, that there's not a whole lot of new thoughts coming from Stan and a lot of other older, veterans of ufology. And, I went on there and I was respectful of Stan because I do respect him. But at the same time, I said, I think that basically what Stan did was to bring a little bit of credibility to this in a serious way, to treat it in a serious way, to take the hardcore facts to the skeptics that there is a phenomenon going on. All of that work that he's done has been great. But I think when it comes to his statements about the extraterrestrial hypothesis and Zeta Reticuli and all these kind of things, I don't find a lot of usefulness for that because it doesn't seem to fit the phenomenon to me and to a lot of other people. And so my statement was, I think that we've basically outgrown Stanton's extraterrestrial explanations for the UFO phenomena. And clearly, Stan said on our show, I think that he's not resistant to other explanations, but he's interested in the extraterrestrial explanation. Same with Kevin Randall. I mean, Kevin wasn't willing to dismiss other ideas. It's mainly, I think, public. So I get this guy, Joseph Kapp, who comes onto the iconoclast board, and I had put up a thread, a little reply in there about the feedback theory, the feedback loop, and I've explained that on this show, so everybody knows what I'm talking about. And the reply to that, which doesn't include extraterrestrial involvement by this Joseph Cap, was, well, people who pontificate things like this obviously aren't up to the smarts of ETs. This is the stuff of religion and blah blah blah, and basically just tear me apart. And and I went on there and I said, well, Joe, the problem is that you got nothing in all the time that UFOs have been studied in this modern area, 60 plus years. We don't have that single tangible piece of evidence. We don't have this. We don't have that. It's time to start looking in other directions. And, you can try to marginalize everyone or shout down everyone who says the ETH doesn't fit. Let's move on. Let's look at other things. We can't take it off the table. It can't be taken off the table. But we can focus our energies in other directions that might afford us some progress. And that's the point for me. It's like, what progress has been made in all these years of following that hypothesis, which is still clearly, the favored one, I would say. So it just comes down to that. And I kind of sat back after writing that. And of course, when I wrote my reply, which was not horribly lengthy, but lengthy enough to get my point across, he didn't really have any response to it. He didn't say anything more about it. And so on UFO updates, something came up, and I responded with kind of more of the same, like, where has this gotten us? What has this afforded us as far as progress goes? And Jerome Clark, another guy who, has done a damn fair share of work, just really got seemingly offended about what I said regarding the whole thing. And again, I laid down a whole list of different things, like, it doesn't make any sense for us to keep harping this and keep following this when you mention paranormal with UFOs. That's when it seems to start. That's when the dander gets up. And then when you say the ETH doesn't seem to fit, then it's on for a lot of people. And Jerome made this statement to me that people have been dissing the ETH for years. To imply that speaking out against it earns you the ire of people is ridiculous and blah, blah, blah. I'm thinking, well, you mean like yours?
Yeah,
and clearly I was getting on his nerves.
And doesn't somebody like Jerome Clark know about the connection of all the other paranormal stuff? Hasn't he investigated this stuff? Hasn't he spoken to other
hell yes.
investigators? So what is he even defending? What is a guy like that defending? I don't get it.
I don't know. And it really kind of blew me away because
it's like defending against
myself,
your own knowledge.
Yeah.
That's almost like defending against your best interest in a way.
Yeah. Well, and it's one of those things where when I've heard him on other shows talk about this stuff, I've often thought, wow, we really think a lot alike. We really should get him on the show. We should really, talk to him. And all of a sudden it just came out of nowhere. And I was like, really? Jerome Clark thinks this or doesn't, and again, I laid down a whole list of things, and it was cherry picked over to a reply, and basically what I walked away from, in my opinion, from the list that time, his last reply didn't answer anything that I posed, and basically said, this isn't worth my time, and I've got things to do that are work involved, so I'm going to go do that. Okay, well, that was it. But what was interesting is that Mr. Errol Bruce Knapp, who runs the list, my responses actually grew into another thread, which he retitled "Bashing the ETH." I'm like, what is that? Why am I getting retitled to that? I thought we were talking about this subject. All of a sudden, this subject is now split. And, I thought that was like a little bit, I don't know, shitty. It's a kind of like, why don't you just draw a bullseye on my back now? Okay, great. But, and Stanton Friedman, he chimed in with it as well, and he said that when I said it hasn't afforded us any progress, he then started going on about how, well, it's made us think differently about space travel, and it's made us think differently about our place in the universe. And this, well, that's all great, but that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about, what has it done to afford us progress into the ET, or rather the UFO phenomena? What has it done to do that? It hasn't done anything. We're not any further than we have been. And I get extraordinarily irritated when people go on about, oh my God, I mean, you could go on for hours about stories of people with the ET thing. And I think you had something on the Black Fridays that you talked about that all of a sudden you got, what do you mean, Jeremy? You know what this is. Why don't you just say it?
Yeah.
It blows my mind. It blows my mind that there is no more proof for that than there is any other theory.
Well, I should say that will be
at all. There's no more substantiative evidence.
That will be this coming Sunday's. Just in case people are like, "What episode was that?" It's this Sunday's with Alan Steinfeld, who, funny enough, had an exclusive for us, which was a man named Umo and a woman named Astral. And Umo had filmed the New York UFOs, and he has this whole story, and it sounds very Greerian of, they basically communicated with him. He felt the urge to pull over on Park Avenue or Madison Ave and film these things, and then he feels love and light and the Galactic Federation, yada yada yada. And I was fine with listening. I think anyone who listens to the interview, you'll hear just us listening for a while as basically Alan interviews them, and he does a good job of doing that, actually. But then when it comes to actually talking with any of them, Alan is a very pushy guy, and so he wants to challenge me on my notions of stuff, but his notions of stuff is just completely outlandish. And let me qualify that. It's outlandish in that he's saying that it's disingenuous to call this the Enigma, because I was saying it's disingenuous to say these are aliens when it's unidentified. Unidentified is unidentified, right? Right? And he was saying, well, no, what humans do is interpret things, so it's disingenuous of you to, especially me being an experiencer, to pretend as though I don't know that these are aliens, and so on and so forth, and to call it an enigma and to not take a guess at what it could be. To which I was like, well, if I took a guess at spontaneous regeneration back when, should I have just stuck with that as a scientist and been like, well... Yep, flies come from meat. Should I have just been like, yep, the earth is flat and not investigated
right,
because that's what the culture of the day told me? I mean, it doesn't make any sense what he's saying. So it's ludicrous, but here I am in, being forced into an argument about complete nonsense, in my opinion. And then to talk to people like this, it's like, can you even say to him, to Umo or Astral, those were planes. Or those were balloons, or, I mean, it's just
or
weird.
We know what to get you for your birthday to make you feel happy. Balloons. Because he'll be inspired by them, I mean.
And I saw his footage. He put it on YouTube, and I don't know what his footage is of, but you can't know what his footage is of because he's mostly taking it while he's driving, and so the camera is shaking, so you're seeing double image, and they're both shaking. So It's like, okay, you've taken an image of nothing. Of an airplane, a blimp, the space station, I don't know what.
Right.
But then, of course, you ask the question that I think is sane, which is, well, if you can call them down, because he talks about, meditating in a field. Very Greerian. Once again, you meditate in a field, and this thing came right over his head, this pink UFO, right? And it's like, and Alan asked him, right over your head, right over your head. He's like, well, no, high up in the sky, treetop level. No, high up in the sky, but just positioned over our head. And I said, well, to what end do you think this is? And then, of course, they get into, this is the Galactic Federation, and they're trying to acclimate us and blah, blah, blah. And to which I say, well, how long do they need to do that for, Alan? I mean, you believe this has been around since the beginning of man, right? So How long do they need to acclimate us? How long do they need to study us anthropologically? How long do they need to inseminate us and, make kids and all this sort of, with technology that we have better technology than they do. Right. I mean, all of this stuff,
right.
And there are no good answers. And to ask that question to not Alan particularly, but the other two, you can just hear them getting offended. Like, this is a real challenge to their belief system. So I asked them again, the same question of, well, why don't you just call them down since you have this connection? And then when you ask a question like that, you can feel the disconnect in the air because the answer is, well, we're not ready. Humanity isn't ready, so they're not going to just land and blah, blah, blah. And I'm saying, as I said to Greer, no. I don't mean everybody. I mean you, particularly. You have a connection to them. They make you feel love and light and all this. They give you information downloads, and you can call them to where they're above your head. Why don't you just call them down? They'll open up their spaceship door, and you'll meet them. Why not you? You're ready for it. And then there's this disconnect where it's like, well, it doesn't work that way. Well, why doesn't it work that way? Well, it doesn't work that way because they're from a higher vibration. And so it takes a lot of energy to get to our density. And, and on and on and on. And we're not worth it. Well, apparently we're worth communicating with, but we're not worth landing for and switching densities.
We're worth diddling with our private parts. We're worth that. But past that, we're not really interested. Your gross capability of reproduction. That's what we're here for.
Then Alan is saying, well, what about, he's saying that they're here, acclimating us and love and light and all this horseshit. And I'm saying, well, and earlier he had referenced Bud Hopkins' work. And I said, well, how would you put that up against Bud Hopkins' work, which is, his conclusion is it's either malevolent or at least ambivalent alien space doctors. And I said, if you look at the mainstream coverage of this, aliens are evil, right? So if their message is love and light, it ain't working, right? But they don't get it. And actually, I think part of the disconnect too, because they were talking about how the world, is like, this is all happening now, heading toward 2012, and the world is getting more enlightened and all of this in humanity. And it's like, well, no, here's two things. One, you run in New Age circles, and two, you live in New York where everyone's like mostly liberal. So I think if you step outside those two shells, you're going to see that the world indeed is not getting more enlightened and in many ways is actually getting worse. Just even in terms of our own just U.S. political system, things are getting awfully crazy and racist and weird. So, things are not black and white that way. They're not black and white toward enlightenment. They're pretty much what they've always been, in my opinion. And of course, I asked Alan, you put on these New Age conferences because he had put on the 2012 Crystal Skulls conference in New York, which they were trying to make the case that these UFOs appeared in New York because the Crystal Skulls here, plus the Mayan elders, it opened up some sort of gateway, and these UFOs came through, They can't seem to decide. Are they Galactic Federation? Are they coming from a gateway from somewhere? It's like, whatever the theory is, it doesn't matter as long as they're here and good guys. So I said, well, you've been doing this for how many years? 10. You've been into the New Age how long? All your life. So has there ever been a point in history when it wasn't right around the corner? Have you ever thrown a New Age conference where this wasn't the year, when things weren't getting better? When, humanity wasn't about to transcend to the next phase? Has it ever been the case, the opposite of what you are telling me now? And I said, please answer as honestly as possible. And he said, no, probably not. But he said, this feels like, once again, but this feels different because more and more people are paying attention.
But this feels like it, right.
Yeah, right. We're always feeling like it. And I guess it's like, that's when you realize, like, this really is a belief system. And the belief system is this eternal cups half full. I don't want to deal with the realities around me. Everything's always on the precipice, on the cusp of getting better. And they don't pay attention to things like politics and things like that. So they don't even know what I'm talking about when I bring up, like, well, what about this and that and the other thing? What about racism? What about the Tea Party? What about just any of the local sort of stuff that's like indications we're going to hell in a handbasket? Or the economy? Or, fat cats on Wall Street? Any of this stuff that has gotten us into this quagmire we're in right now. How about the wars? All of this. It's like they just can't see it. They don't pay attention to that. And then to challenge it is to not just be incorrect. It's to be offensive to them. And it's like, it's almost like I'm evil for, and again, not Alan, but the other two, because Alan has a sense of humor about things. And I don't actually think he believes half the shit he says. which is both a curse and a blessing. So, I mean, in a way, I can give him a pass, and yet, on that same way, I probably should not give him a pass at all. I should probably yell at him. But
do you think that? I mean, you mentioned that they're not real up on current events, the state of the world, politically, socially, anything like that. Do you think that part of the reason that they get so offended by that is that they have essentially put on those New Age goggles, much like the older crowd in ufology has put on their ufological goggles and refused to step back out of that it's like escapism in a way?
It's more than that with the New Age. I think it's also a false sense of empowerment. Not just the empowerment of this knowledge of the densities and how reality really works, but that all of this is light and love, and that we're all progressing, and that it's all for the greater good, and blah, blah, blah. I mean, there's great shelter in that.
Right. From my side of things, I mean, looking at the state of ufology, when you're listening to some of the old timers in this, it seems clear to me that most of them seem resistant to anything that isn't the ETH because it's what they've always done. It's what they've always, pontificated on. It's the direction they've always followed. And it's also where they've lectured the most on. They've written the most books upon. They've built every piece of their research upon this theory, like this must be what it is. And then so to go back is to negate everything that they've done and re-examine it, re-question it. And I don't think too many people are willing to do that.
Yeah, I think that's what both camps have in common, both the New Agey and the nuts and bolts, is that it's about their identities. This is how they identify themselves. And we've said this before in the show, to challenge what seems to be the status of facts or the status of hypotheses or theories is actually to challenge somebody else's identity. And you don't realize you're doing that until you get into a discussion with them and see what their reaction is. And then you go, oh, wait a minute. This isn't about what I thought it was about. This isn't about science or getting to the truth. This is about who you see yourself as and what you want the world to be.
Yeah, and what you've built. I mean, what you've built in prior years of, standing up in front of people and talking about this phenomenon or writing books about it. You almost take the logical approach and say, well, when you've written, 5 or 6 books on this and you've always postulated the extraterrestrial hypothesis throughout all of them, and that's your connective tissue throughout everything, it becomes a matter of income to question that. And to me, how great or how big a book would it be for Stanton Friedman, for instance, to write a book now saying, you know what, guys, maybe I was wrong. Let's examine this direction. I mean, I think that would be a landmark book for somebody like him to examine a truly out of left field theory, whatever that theory might be, whether it's the psychedelic theory, whether it's, the feedback loop, whether it's, any of these other alternative looks. I think that would be an amazing turn for him. And I think people would be genuinely engaged by that because he's an engaging guy.
Yeah, I've been saying that for quite some time. I think
but it won't
that would
happen.
be the next big thing that he
can
possibly do.
Yeah. Absolutely. And instead, you've got the guy, still doing stuff that probably has the best handle on this stuff out of anybody, which is Jacques Vallee. Probably, again, has put out a new book, and I don't have it yet, but I'm quite sure in saying that I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of ETH little green men in it.
Well, I have it, and I've started reading it, and it's basically, in a roundabout way, a sequel to Magonia, and what's brilliant about it is he stops his UFO cases at the moment that we first flew. So you ain't getting the 1947, this all started with Kenneth Arnold, or any of that sort of stuff.
Right.
And, they have different classifications, sort of a, vehicle, but, thing in the sky, thing with occupants, just occupants, they have these sort of classifications, but, I mean, they're real upfront right away with saying, look, all of this spacemen stuff, is interpretation, and we don't deal with interpretation. We just deal with what people saw.
Yeah. Strip it away. Right.
Yeah.
Strip away all of the earthbound pedestrian answers that are always coming forth and just say, here's what it is. Here are the facts laid out in front of us, and that's it.
Now you put this book, which is essentially a catalog of sightings, and you put that with up against Lesley Kean's book, which is testimony and a catalog of sightings, and Richard Dolan's book, which is a catalog of sightings and catalog of ufological figures. I would love to see somebody put those three, because these are at least those two are the big two, and then Vallee's book hasn't even come out yet, but let's just assume that'll be part of the triad. And I mean, what do you think is more useful? Just even in terms of talking about sightings of things that have happened since flight. I mean, right there, that alone is just like, yeah, you got a point there. Maybe we shouldn't even look at that.
Right. Well, if I was going to weigh the worth, I'd put my money on Jacques. I mean, seriously.
Well, that's it. And I think it's interesting that Jacques has a book, and Graham Hancock, although it's a work of fiction, it was inspired by, the ayahuasca voice,
right,
which is out, and he's, on his promotional tour, he's essentially talking about, he's not really talking about the book so much, it looks from the promotional stuff I'm getting. It looks like he's really lecturing on ayahuasca. So you're seeing these alternative views, but it's like, coming out now, which is great. I think it's great. And once again, I think it's like, to me personally, it's a sign that the Paratopia Quarterly magazine needs to be done right now.
Yeah.
It's like we're ripe for the picking at this point to do what we want to do. Right. But in just looking at it, it's like, okay, so you've got now the Dolan book and the Lesley Kean book, and everyone, whether they are a disclosure activist or not, who roots for these books to work, are rooting for them to be taken seriously by the mainstream and finally have ufology be seen as, for the reality that it is, blah, blah, blah. And then you get Jacques Vallee, who wipes the floor with these people intellectually, and with just intellectual honesty, if I can be so bold. Are we rooting for his book in the same way? Because if we are, then say goodbye to the other two books. Because they can't exist. They can't exist in the same media narrative.
Right. Yeah, well, I think you know where I'm at with that.
Well, I would love to know the people who like Jacques Vallee's work and respect him and ultimately believe that he's more onto something than a Lesley Kean or a Rich Dolan, but like the attractiveness of a Dolan or a Kean, in that they are, attractive to the media in some way, or at least seem to be serious researchers. How would you stack those books up? Would you say, well, I'm glad these two exist, but now that Jacques' new book is out, that's the one that we gotta really promote, and that's the one that we've got to be rooting for, because it's just more honest in its assessment of what is and is not going on here. I mean, what do you do with that? Because again, can you root for all of them? I don't know.
Do you want me to be honest? I mean, as far as Rich's book and Lesley's book, I just don't care. I mean, that's my answer, as short as that is. I just don't care. I'm over that. I'm over the whole disclosure thing. I was over that 15 years ago. It never seems to go anywhere. It's always inside sources say, or even if it's generals saying this, or colonels, or whatever. That's all well and good. You may have seen the phenomena, and it's an interesting an account. I would say Lesley's book is probably interesting in the account. What happened? What did you see? What occurred? What was the reaction? That's interesting. I mean, there's nothing uninteresting about that. But as far as looking at it in the sense of, these are high-ranking military and governmental people, and therefore that testimony carries more weight than the average citizen. I mean, that's really what that sort of thing to me is about. It's about, this is an astronaut we're talking about. And an astronaut's probably a bad example because that is the ultimate experience, I would think. But that certain witnesses within governmental or military or intelligence circles carries more weight because of who they are. I don't care how you cut it. When it comes right down to it, it's all human perception and interpretation. Again, goes back to the same thing. So if you want to talk about digging into this, and stop with the whole surface level of disclosure and testimony, and I saw this and I saw that, you'd go with Jacques' book.
Well, even in Jacques' book, he says, look, these are not crazies and cranks.
Right.
Here's an emperor.
Right, yeah.
Like he goes down the list of various testimony from various people throughout the ages. And it's like, I think what the point of this is that if you're asking for disclosure based on these facts, the interpretation of data, well, the narrative that this thing all started in the 40s is just plain wrong, right? So it isn't little aliens that just came here in the 40s and have some finite purpose that we can all understand. At least we don't think so, because it didn't start in the 40s. Right. So once you throw that out, well, okay, that narrative's gone. And then you look at, well, what makes more sense then? Does it make more sense that what the people in a Lesley Kean book are reporting is what they think it is? Because that's what the premise is, right? We all think that this is aliens or something. And of course, Lesley Kean won't say that. She'll say, well, we still don't know what this is.
Right.
We just want it disclosed. But
whatever it is, yeah.
Yeah, whatever it is. But that's bullshit. You're pumping aliens here. That's what you're pumping.
Right.
And so, I mean, do we not want somebody who actually looks at the data and tries to make sense of it in a larger, more realistic cross-cultural context? Or do we just want someone who can get the media's attention by saying, look, I can prove that aliens exist and that the government needs to disclose it?
Well, that depends on what camp in ufology you're in, doesn't it? I mean, if you're talking about the majority of people out there who are very tied into the whole ETH, I mean, go with the mass public opinion. What is this? It's little green men from Planet X. It's extraterrestrial. That's what it is. And so then Richard's book and Lesley Kean's book feed into that aspect of it. If you're not looking at surface level hocus pocus and dog and pony show, and you want to see a little bit deeper into this, and you want to, and not only look at it from cross-cultural, but also drawing parallels into different historical folklorish, or whatever we would call folklorish, but drawing the lines from this to psychedelics, to folklore, to cultural icons, to archetypes, to psychological. I mean, all of that, I think, is a hell of a lot more valuable, because it's not making the immediate assumption of it flies in the sky, they don't look like us, it must be spacemen. I mean, really, that's what all this comes down to. I would like to know where that actually started. Like, where did somebody first sight something and go, they must be from another planet? I mean, why would that be the first thing you jump to?
Well, because we're the technological age, right? So that's where we were looking in terms of science fiction and all of that. It was like we were looking at canals on Mars. Are there canals? Mm-hmm. All the sci-fi was about aliens and all that. So now you've got these things called, dubbed flying saucers, which seem to be metallic, seem to be, at least that becomes the narrative of them. They're sort of metallic round objects that look like intelligently controlled technology. Well, if it's not us, what else is it? Well, the only other thing we've got our gaze on at this point is aliens. So it's got to be aliens.
It's got to be that. Yeah. So it's strictly based on our own reflection. That's what it's based on. It's based on our own reflection of technology and our own scope of science at the time is where that came from. And so as everything is progressing, where is that leading us? So I don't know. I mean, nowhere to me is that going anywhere. That's not going anywhere. Whereas I think something like what Jacques has just written probably is going to crack open a few more eggshells and be worth more in terms of studying this in a realistic way and not so much in a wish-fulfilling way.
Right. What's also weird is probably a lot of it was ingrained in us because of the War of the Worlds broadcast, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, here's Wells, telling us it's aliens. Mm-hmm. These flying saucers are real, and they're aliens, and they're attacking, and all this sort of stuff. And, I mean, why would we look at some fictionalized thing that gave fear to the people who heard it over the radio,
right,
and have that dictate to us how we examine this thing for the next several decades? I mean, that's just kind of outlandish on the face of it.
Oh yeah, it's absurd. I don't know. I'll tell you. You mentioned Graham Hancock's new book, and he was actually on boingboing.net. Very large, very popular blogosphere of a site. And he talked about his book. That was like one of his first posts on there. I don't know if he's guest blogging, whether he's always on there or has access to be a poster of that information on there. But I read maybe the first 10 replies, genuinely pretty hostile. I mean, pretty hostile stuff. I mean, I didn't get too far into it because I was at work and I was kind of looking on the periphery. But, I mean, essentially saying ayahuasca, all of these different things are giving us view or altering our perception to see something that's always surrounding us, and that the nature of hallucination is highly questionable, just because of the consistency of experience and so on and so forth. We know what he has said on the show, and man, the reaction there from people at large. Some people were intrigued by it, but most of the people were saying, this whole ayahuasca thing, I liked it better when it was unknown. It's gotten to be fashionable to talk about ayahuasca, and then the notion that that ingesting these chemicals gives you some kind of altered perception to see these beings that are around us that you think are external for us when we're all, experiencing the same altered brain chemistry, blah, blah, is just absurd. And I think one person even chastised him for basically not promoting drug use, but, saying that there's something to be gained from this in the sense of therapy, which medical data does dictate that there's been amazing accomplishments with addiction and psychedelics and all of that. So genuinely very kind of a negative response to what he was talking about, which would surprise me really out of that crowd over there. Very curious.
I have nothing to add to that.
Well, I mean, the correlation between exactly the kind of reaction you get in ufology when you mention alternate theories of that, when they mention alternate theories in the psychedelic realm, when they're talking about Strassman or Hancock or any of these people, or McKenna, you get a lot of people very interested, but then you also get a lot of hostile responses to exactly what people are experiencing, which I guess it's up for debate. I get it.
Well, at least that one guy just sounds like a complete dweeb, like, oh, it's too fashionable now to talk about ayahuasca. Let's move on to something else.
Right. I mean, I was just like, what does that mean?
Ayahuasca is so yesterday.
I drink that for coffee in the morning. So anyway, you want more evidence that even ufology is on a downward slide. As if we didn't know that already.
Do I ever?
Filer's Files. Ever hear of that?
I'm
George
on Filer's Files. Yes, George Filer.
George Filer, MUFON Eastern Region Director. Got his Filer's Files number 43 for 2010 today. And, gosh, by golly, what do you see as the cover story? Photo of UFO taken in the Alps near Hassenboll, Switzerland by Billy Meyer.
Is this a new photo?
No.
Damn it. What happened? Did they stop coming around?
Yes.
Huh.
Yes. So you scroll down a little bit in the on the email here, and you see NASA JPL scientist among the first to endorse Billy Meyer photos. And of course, it's the same, U.S. rep song and dance of, Michael Malin and Robert Post and Marcel Vogel and David Ferning. All these people, they first found the authenticity of Billy Meyer's photographs. These were the first people. And it's just basically a rehash of the same crap that's already been disputed and known. And then underneath of that, I'm thinking to myself, well, okay, maybe he just got kind of badgered and he figured, I'll shut him up and put it in. No, editor's note. Wendell Stevens personally assured me the Meyer photos were authentic.
Well, there you have it.
God damn.
Rest his soul.
I'm just like, are you kidding me, really? MUFON Eastern Regional Director.
He's a respectable deity. Wendell Stevens.
What? I mean, come on. I mean, let's where do you even go with that? I mean, come on. George Filer, come on, George. Are you kidding me? I mean...
I'll tell you what the most offensive thing about that is. It's that you're still talking about anything from way back then. I mean,
yeah.
You talk about these alleged aliens doing the same thing over and over again like broken robots, and then you look at the ufologists, and it's like, you can have, say, a dry day or a dry week or a dry, 20 or 30 years, and instead of letting it go, they'll just keep talking about the same cases over and over again.
Yeah.
To the extent to where they'll even resurrect complete horseshit like Billy Meyer.
Yeah.
I mean, I almost wonder if they do that so that they can conveniently forget that they knew it was horseshit, so that they can argue it again and figure it out again and have something to, have their mind tease something out and be mentally active.
I don't know. I mean, yeah, you wonder. And frankly, I mean, most times when I look at George's stuff, I mean, he puts some interesting stories in most of the time, and it's every once in a while you get the lens flare or the light aberration or the hair in front of the lens type of thing, photographs that he posted here, and you go, oh well, okay, once in a while. Some of them are fairly interesting. I mean, he's got one, here for Louisiana cylinder. Obviously a cylindrical object, rounded at both ends. It's odd looking. I would like to see more of those photos. I would like to, see the original photos. But, when I saw this, I was like, what is this? What is going on? I don't know, George. I don't know how he knew Wendell Stevens, but I mean, that he personally assured him that the Meyer photos were authentic is like, well, come on. And I'm not just saying this because Wendell's passed away. I mean, this is a guy who bullshitted more than I could possibly imagine when it came to the UFO thing. I mean, I mean, come on, give me a break. I mean, this case alone.
Let alone that he was jailed.
Well, yeah. Well, there's that. I mean, come on. It's just that is still the most prime example of the horse shit in this field, and always will be to me. That'll always be the poster child for bullshit. So,
doesn't it also say doesn't it also say in that Filer's Files that this report comes from the representative of the Billy Meyer case?
That's correct. Yes, absolutely.
So is George Filer not affiliated with that man's work? I mean, is he completely oblivious to Billy Meyer and his American representative, or
who knows? Who knows?
I mean, he can't be, right? He's the head of a MUFON organization.
Yeah. I'm a little surprised that you've got MUFON Eastern Regional Director there, and yet right below it, literally right below it, is a Meyer picture that is. Then I've been assured these are authentic. I mean, I certainly hope that's not reflective of MUFON. That's all I can say, but it's right there above it.
Well, I mean, from the MUFON people that I've met, these are not bright human beings.
Well,
these are people who got their fucking decoder ring in a Cracker Jack box, and they call themselves, MUFON directors.
Well, I mean, I think it depends on where you are. I think there are definitely some good folks at MUFON and in MUFON, but
I'm sure there are, but it doesn't matter. It's like, once again, like everything else in ufology, you put an unqualified person up next to a qualified person, and they're
right,
and they might as well be, to Joe Observer, they're the same person.
Exactly. Yeah, that's been a long-standing problem. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know what that's all about, but I saw that this morning. I was like, oh my God, are you kidding me? This crap is resurfacing yet again. Come on, George. Why would you do this? Why? I don't know if it goes back to what we've talked about before, which is like the elderly syndrome of, do older people have to have something like this to answer questions for them in some way? I don't know. I mean, I've always been kind of fascinated to go to UFO conferences, and we've talked about this before, that, there's a fair amount of, 55, 60 and up at these things. And I mean, what are they looking for? I mean, they're looking for proof of something, but maybe that's part of what it is. I don't know.
I got a question. I mean, I've stopped following Billy Meyer's work since he started flinging a flaming Brillo pad around his head and saying it was a spaceship. But
yes.
I'm just curious: is there a mythological reason in the canon of Monsieur Meyer as to why these aliens, these Plajarans, have not come back?
God, why would you ask such a thing?
Why is he not still taking photos of them? I mean, besides the advent of the internet and people with Photoshop who can figure out where the string is, like why would he, why is he no longer? Why are they not contacting him in such a way anymore?
Well, I think if I'm not mistaken, and I may be because I don't follow it either, that everything is contact wise. Those have stopped. I don't know why exactly he said they stopped. Now it's all telepathic, which again, it's convenience. Like I think, I mean. I think I know the profile of a Meyer believer at this point well enough to say, well, how many more photos do you need? How much more proof do you need? I mean, look at all these. There's, over 1,000 photographs. There's contact notes dating back to such and such that accurately predict all this and that. Whatever. I mean, it's because there's computers in Photoshop. That's why. That's why. I mean, that's the answer. Because when you go, I mean, years ago, when you talk about the challenge put forth by the Meyer rep, duplicate these photographs, do this, do that, which I'm like, okay, well, I'm not sure what that'll prove, but sure, you can do that with models in a string very easily. And here's how, and here's why it works, and here's the similarities between this and that. In talking to different people who have examined the stuff way back when you hear about, I think it was Robert Post. These people were not given negatives per se, at least not any of them that I've been able to talk to or contact in some way. I believe, I mean, and you have to excuse me because I've been out of touch for this for a while, and I purposely ignore it because it's garbage and not worth the time. But even back in the day, when you're talking about examining the negatives and the actual, prints and or slides, I would say aside from Jim Delatoso, I don't know of anybody in the quote unquote expert bracket they've conveniently concocted as these people authenticate. They don't authenticate them, first of all. That's the first thing. But there have been several of them have said that they weren't shown, negatives. They weren't shown direct prints. They weren't shown. They were given a lithograph. One man was given one. I think it was Robert Post said, I realized these were lithographs. These weren't prints. And so what can you do with that? That's a print process. There's nothing I can do with that. So I would say, I mean, for my money and my opinion only, the fix was in from the get-go. I don't think anybody got anything of value to study to start with. I'm pretty sure that Malin told me he was given an image file on a computer image file and not so much a printer negative. Again, to put this stuff up to a third party right now, if you had, which they don't, they claim they don't have any negatives out of all those, over 1,000. They don't have any of them anymore. All the negatives are gone. All the original prints are gone. Convenient, right?
No, it doesn't sound like it. I mean, if you want to get to the bottom of this, that sounds like the least convenient thing that could happen for you.
Well, yeah, right? Convenient. So it's not able to be tested by today's standards. We only have a very murky investigation of this, and quite. I mean, at least when we talked to Jim at the X conference, Delatoso, he said, you mentioned the wedding cake ship, which is something that they tout all the time. Yeah, no, those were clearly models. I remember sitting there listening to him say this. I mean, I heard it with my own ears. And I think you've got it on tape. I mean, come on. What more do you need? And he was actually a little bit irritated at how his work had been portrayed by that whole camp. I don't know. I mean, why isn't there any more photos coming out? Why isn't that happening? Because there's ways to test for this now, and there's EXIF data for digital stuff. There's ways to check with Photoshop. There's ways to check with any number of different ways. And, you can't get away with stuff as easy as you could back in the 70s. I mean, that's the answer.
I don't know. I know that he had a gun, right? An alien gun.
Yeah. That interestingly, the tip is an exact facsimile of a Japanese toy ray gun.
Well, what happened to the gun? Do we know? Did they take it back, the aliens?
Oh, who in the hell knows? Yeah, of course they took it back. Where is it?
I like that there's video footage of him walking around with a gun, There's video footage of the hole in the tree that the gun produced, but there's no image of him firing the gun.
The gun,
tree.
right?
It's like, how much more ludicrous does this need to get? And it's still kicking around. I mean,
well, it's a cartoon. I mean, but to me, it's the poster child of what not to be, what not to look at in this stuff. I mean, that goes without saying. I mean, come on, I agree with that crap. But it's not like it's the only one. Let's be realistic. It's not the only one. I mean, there's still people out there talking about any number of cases that they feel strongly are evidence of this phenomena that, you look at it and you go, what are you talking about? I mean, when you talk about these people who have built such a foundation upon their so-called evidence, and it looks like, based on not so much the evidence they presented, but what they say in response to the question, why are they here? What do they want? That's where it starts to get into all sorts of religious, flavors, and it takes on a kind of a cultish type air to it. And then you go, oh, well, I see what's going on here. I'm not happy with religion as it's been presented to me all my life. So I'm going to make my own. And this will be my cornerstone for creating this. I'll get the attention with the sensational evidence that, I will ardently defend no matter what the outcome is. But it'll give me a chance to push my ideologies to whomever I choose and have a following listening, a following of sorts for that. So to me, that's what it comes out being.
Yeah. And I don't know. Did you follow the dude who, predicted that UFOs would show up on the 13th?
No.
All right. Because, people are trying to put this together. And I believe he said UFOs would show up over major cities all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that balloons showed up in New York is like, oh my God, there's a connection. It's like, no, but people are so just dying to make these connections that, I don't know, I feel like we're actively trying to find them now. You know what I mean? Like, who even knew who this obscure guy with this obscure book
right
was, except that somebody really wants to make connections. And I feel like we've really got to watch this in ourselves, especially heading toward 2012.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And it does matter whether or not we make wrong connections. It just does. That's the way things work.
Yeah. Well, I have a feeling this is just the beginning of, what we've seen the past couple of weeks is just the beginning of this kind of knee-jerk responses to these kind of things. I mean, I think you're right. I think as we approach 2012, I think it's going to get a whole lot more frequent and a whole lot worse.
Well, I thought what was interesting was that I asked Alan if the Mayan elders or any of the indigenous folks at the gathering, I mean, assuming they're not con artists, I don't know, but let's assume they are who they say they are, which is a big leap of faith for me. Do they agree on what's going to happen in 2012? And the answer is no. Nobody seems to really know. Nobody seems to agree. And that it's not an end date to them anyway. It's just another day in the calendar. So,
wow.
Whatever. But what did I want to say? Oh, yeah. One of the questions that I had for them was, and I put this out there to anyone who's had any sort of contact with these beings or claims to have some sort of elite status where they are channeling an alien or they are, having a one-on-one Galactic Federation contact.
Right.
Do these beings tell you anything that you could not learn from another human?
Right.
Is there anything here that doesn't sound like New Age or Buddhism or some sort of religious mysticism? And of course, Alan's answer was, well, Jeremy, you were contacted. What did they tell you? You've had this happen. And my answer is, yes. And they told me nonsense. I mean, one of the things was cool. Like, I understand hither, thither, and in that understanding shall neither be swept away nor carried on the seas of time. Well, one, that doesn't sound very alien. And
right.
Two, it did make sense to me, or perhaps I made sense of it, but it's still not something that I couldn't have come to on my own, or
right.
You know what I mean? Or even saying, do we humans not understand that other planets cannot help us if we continue to block them out and kill ourselves?
Right.
What does that mean? Like that's pretty vague. And again, not something that is evidence of anything, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
So is there anything that you can even think of, Jeff, that was in any sort of testimony of channeling or of contact, that struck you as, well, that person couldn't have known that. Humans couldn't have known that. That had to have been an outside entity.
No. Not in recent memory, no. I mean, one thing for me that runs tandem to your question is, have I ever heard anybody say something in terms of contact with some sort of being that's clearly not human, that what they have been told is similar in character to things that I've heard on my own from these things? And that question for that is absolutely, yeah. It's not that it's not anything none of us could have known, but it's the attitude in which it's said, it's the way it's conveyed, it's the I don't know, the cryptic tone to it all. It's very familiar. And I think especially when it came to talking to Dennis McKenna on the phone for a couple hours one Sunday afternoon before we interviewed him. I mean, we had a really long talk, and I wanted to know so much more about the mushroom voice. I wanted to hear much more about how does it say? What's its attitude? What's it like? What's it feel like? And the way he described it was like, yeah, that's alien. That's alien to me. That's that attitude. That's that sardonic humor. That's that, what do you want me to tell you? Well, I want to know the answer to everything. Well, I could tell you, but you're not that bright. You really won't get it. So here's just a little bit. That's like so the kind of attitude, not necessarily the verbiage that I've heard, but that kind of flavor to everything is definitely present. That I've had. Have I ever heard anything like you're talking about, like they couldn't possibly? No.
So what do you think it is about us where we really, really want to believe that this is aliens, but when pressed to, we seem to know what that means, right? We seem to know, okay, if we think they're aliens, we know what that means. They're either little malevolent doctors, or they're space brothers, and they're trying to acclimate us to join the bigger community. Mm-hmm. And yet, I defy anyone to find them telling us anything alien.
Yeah.
So where is it? Like, how is this possible? Including people who have asked them just what you're saying, show me the bigger picture. What is the bigger picture?
Right.
I mean, the closest to that I know of probably is Strieber, right? Where he's basically, you ain't going to get it. It's a box within a box, and you don't get to see it. So fuck off, kid.
Right. Get out of my hair.
And what does that tell you? And what does that answer tell you? It tells you this isn't aliens.
Yeah. Yeah, it's something bigger, something far more complex than that. I think that's what gets under our dander so much about this whole thing is that, we look at what so many people want to put upon this whole subject and how they want to. I mean, everybody in ufology talks about thinking outside the box, right? That's where everybody goes. Yeah, when you really look at it, you take the UFO goggles off and you take a step back, no one's thinking out of the fucking box. Everybody's still in the box. And now we're in this extraterrestrial flesh and blood aliens that are coming here interacting with the environment and the population. This is happening. We know this. No, you don't know it. You don't know it. And yet it continues over and over and over, whether it's media, whether it's the internet, whether it's a conference, it keeps on going in that direction. Let me ask you, wouldn't you say that that you see a little bit of a turn or a nudge in the way of ufology? And I'm not talking about major figures now. I'm talking about people you interact with, not only our listeners, but other people you just might meet in passing who see a bigger picture to the UFO thing than the ETH.
Well, yeah, sure. I mean,
more than you used to, right? I mean, you see more of that, or you hear more of that than you used to.
Well, certainly. I mean, Tim Banal is someone who started off as a disclosure. I don't know if advocate is the right term, but certainly was attracted to the disclosure thing until he investigated it, and then, comes out the other side seeing a larger unexplained pattern.
Right.
And then, of course, you got Nick Redfern, who sort of subscribes to more of a tricksterish type thing, and Greg Bishop. I think also does. And
right.
Yeah. So I think I think more and more people, and I think Jacques Vallee, just the fact that he has a new book by a major publisher, it's Tarcher Penguin, I think that will do some damage to this whole field finally.
Yeah, finally, thank God. Yeah.
And maybe we should even refine our questions, so it's, I don't know, just our questions to ufology about their nuts and bolts stance. Maybe we just come up with an outline of questions and be like, okay, answer these questions since you believe that this is aliens. 1, how long have these things been with us? And if you say beyond 1947, how long do they have to be with us before they're no longer alien?
Right.
2, how come they don't say anything alien? 3, how come they're still doing the same crap, according to this hypnotically retrieved testimony now that they've been doing for the last 60 years when it wouldn't take us that long in their advanced race. We'll just put these questions out there, and why is it not okay to be something else? I'd really like to know that beyond, the Stan Friedmans of the world who have made a living off of and an identity off this, but just for people who don't have that. I mean, would it be so bad if it were something anomalous?
Yeah.
They didn't get into this to question it. They got into this to answer it.
Yeah. Yeah. When you talk about laying out a line of questions to ask these people, I'll make a prediction right now. I mean, if you actually do that and put that out there, you won't get a whole lot of answers. You won't get people to answer it. Because essentially I did that on the updates list, and essentially when I said that there's all sorts of other ways to look at this, and there are all sorts of other ways to kind of approach this thing because the direction we've been going hasn't really afforded us anything. The only argument that there is that there's a lack of convincing data that points to extraterrestrial visitors. But yet we always know where these UFO cases go. We don't have the technology that can do this, so it must be somewhere, something extraterrestrial, bin. That's where it goes. If you've got an unknown case, then essentially they're open-ended. They don't point conclusively to extraterrestrials. I'm not arguing for a theory in this. I mean, this is important to this whole discussion. I'm not arguing for a theory. I'm arguing that by and large, ufology has picked a prevailing theory that doesn't fit, and so now it's time to start looking elsewhere. And I'll also argue that we don't know, and we ought to look at other places before building this entire belief system upon all this. This is what is so resistant to this, is because this is well-founded on nothing, but it's still well-founded in the public's view of this and in ufology's view of this. And so, when you talk about any kind of alternate theory, I think, and this is just my opinion from the interactions I've had, not only with the updates list, but elsewhere around the net, the minute you bring up an alternate theory, or you say alternate theories to this, or that you're not an ETH subscriber, you get one of two things. You're a debunker, number one, or your alternate theory or other directions means demonic forces, fairies, or as Jerome Clark put it on the UFO updates list, wild ass theories. I think it says a lot about the climate of ufology when you're talking about alternate theories and you're saying the ETH doesn't seem to fit. Why doesn't it fit? Where else can we look? And that is arbitrarily retitled to be calling bashing the ETH, which is, like I said, putting a target on your back. At some point, somebody's got to speak up for the subjective nature of this. That looking into human consciousness and the nature of perception and reality, as far as we go as human beings, while it may not directly be of large interest to a lot of people, that might give us small strings to pull on that might lead us back to ufology with maybe a better or alternate way of looking at things that might get us some progress in this. I would just like to see, if nothing else in my lifetime, a little bit of progress or a little bit of better understanding to ask the better questions. So I'm not interested in believing anything, but again, you can bring these issues up to the hardcore ETH diehards, the old school guys, and I've experienced this. It's right in front of me. Literally, you won't get an answer. I've got other things to do. I can't be bothered with this. Jerry Clark said to me that there's nothing here for me to further discuss with you. I responded to your original posting only to dispute the baseless notion that non-ET speculators are persecuted by fellow ufologists. What? They're not? Well, you need to get out more is my answer. Because, yes, they do. You do get flack for that.
How does he say that and then he's giving you flack in that thread? I don't get it.
Well, exactly. I mean, so I would predict that would be the kind of reaction that you will get. I don't have time for this. I don't have time for your nonsense because I'm not interested in conflicting with your beliefs. I'm not interested in arguing with you and your beliefs. I'm like, I have no beliefs. I'm not interested in believing anything. I said I brought up several issues in response to your reply to me, which you chose not to address. That's fine. I mean, for me, it seems fairly typical, at least in this subject, for people to pick their answers and ignore what isn't in their best interest in the discussion to even answer. That's really what I found. If it's not in their interest to debate it, the debate won't happen because it's not in their best interest to talk about that because that's something they can't answer. And so I don't think you'll get an answer to your questions. The hardcore ones. I mean, there are a lot more too, besides what you brought up.
And now it's time to say goodnight.
Really? It's over already?
I don't know. You want to continue on? I'm sure people would love to hear us babble.
No, it's fine. I think we're good.
Okay. Yes, I think we've exhausted the ETH topic because people already know how we feel. Yeah. We're interchangeable at this point, you and I, in many ways.
Ew.
Yes. Well, it's weird. I find myself saying things that I feel as though I've always felt, but I know I've heard you say more than me. So then I'm like, geez, should I preface this by saying, as my friend and co-host Jeff Ritzman says, or do I just say them?
Just say them. I mean, it should be obvious. I mean, it should be obvious. It should be obvious to a lot more people. That's what worries me about this whole thing. If you take out the lunatic fringe part of this and you take out, the rampant new age ramblers, and if you remove all that, you've still got a core of people out there, otherwise pretty intelligent people who are hook, line, and sinker swallowed into it's extraterrestrial. I mean, there's just,
well, again,
I say it doesn't fit. I mean, I say look at it. Just
but it's levels of denial, and the level is that they don't realize, or they're not going to acknowledge that they're the one with the belief system, and that belief system is to protect the identity that they've formed around the belief. Because again, they're in this to answer and not to question. So for Jerome Clark to say to you, or to allude even, well, I don't want to argue because clearly this is your belief. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's like when the really dumb guy says, oh, you're fucking stupid. Right. And you're like, no, you don't get it. You're so stupid that you can't get that you're stupid, that you're the dumb one here. Mm. And it's the same thing here, except without stupidity. It's just belief. It's like, no, you're the one with the belief, dude. Don't you get it?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean,
how do you explain that to people? Like, how do you make it so that they see it?
See, to me, I got kind of Jerome Clark speaks a lot about experiences, and then speaks about, there's an experiential part of this, and then there's, the reality part of it. And I think that I don't fully understand his take, and I've listened to him speak before, and excuse me, and I've listened to how he kind of interprets that, but I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that, when you're talking about experiences, I think that, you can easily dismiss those as just experiences, and then you have evidential cases where there is some sort of physical trace case or whatever, marks or photographs or whatever. Those things, to me, they're no less important than the experiential cases are. I kind of put them in the same thing. I think ufology has long said, well, that's your say-so, that's an experience. But there is something to be said for experience. There's something to be said for people who have the courage to talk about their experience with complete honesty. But that's the problem, is that ufology has created this climate where you can't talk about this in any other way but the preconceived way that the foundation has been laid down. That's where you get that disconnect between experiential data and hardcore data. Hard pictures, landing cases, this sort, all of that interactive stuff. That's where the problem lies, is that the experiential cases are kind of put in a corner and said, well, we don't know about you, but here we've got something we can put our hands on. And that's not dissimilar from what Bruce Maccabee said to you in response to your question at the X conference. When you're talking about the ETH, I can get my hands on that. I can get my handle onto that. And the other stuff, I don't know where to go with that. That's, we've been saying this for a while. And the answer is, well, we should learn. We should.
Well, what would they say to somebody like a Jacques Vallee who has cataloged this and categorized this and done the work of a scientist, as opposed to what Jerome Clark is saying is just, spouting off nonsense or whatever? I mean, how can you argue with a scientist who is doing science and coming up with something different than what is essentially your interpretation based on your culture and your wants?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how do you argue that? It's no longer just a philosophical argument. Now you've got a book of evidence in front of you, right, and how they drew that evidence, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, how do you argue that?
Well, I don't think you do. But unfortunately, you said earlier, the same problem that we've been talking about for a while is that everybody would see this as the same thing, or coming from the same source. It's all just arguing amongst themselves, where I view Jacques being outside of this festering boil. I don't see him as even paying any mind to it, which is great, and I'm glad he doesn't, because it's the source of a great load of aggravation and hopelessness. I think, to get anywhere in this, or to, as I said on my blog, the answer is to put your head down, forget the nonsense, and just do the work. And when you do that, I don't think there's a whole lot of repercussion that can come back. If you've done the work, here it is, I've laid it out. What's your argument for this? There isn't one. Unfortunately, this field views everyone's opinions in the same light. They're all equally valid. That's the problem. Remember Book of Thoth? Remember that?
Nope.
I'm sure you don't. That was our first foray into saying, not every opinion is as valid as every other one. There are educated opinions. There are non-educated opinions, but they both seem to hold the same weight in this club, and that doesn't make any sense.
Right.
So there you are.
Well, there you have it.
And we move on from here.
That's right. So anything we need to mention on the way out?
Well, yeah, Jer, I think we should say this is the last show that we're doing as a whole. From now on, you all belong to us. Subscribe at paratopia.net. Did you hear that?
Or just order single episodes for a mere $1.25 an episode.
Right. Thank you, Jeremy Slimy Salesman.
That's right. From here on out, we're whoring ourselves.
Right. That's it. And I think big things are afoot for us. We're going to be doing a lot more with the show, and Jeremy just informed me of an amazing interview that we're going to be getting hooked up with soon. So you're not going to want to miss that.
Yes, we have actually, I think, several powerhouse interviews lined up.
Yeah. So we're definitely trying to go the extra mile for the subscriber base, and we hope you guys will come along for the ride. I think it's going to be great.
Yeah, and I feel like we should mention that the subscriber message board is not going to be even close to the same thing as the regular message board, and so we're hoping that the regular message board remains as lively and vibrant as it is now. So I don't want anyone to get the sense that we're like abandoning the message board part of the program or anything like that, just for subscribers. It'll be its own unique monster.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for my money, I think it's a little bit more personal, and it's a little bit closer than the big message board, which is, like far-reaching, expounding stuff. I think the members only board is going to be a little bit more. Think of it as a small coffee house on the internet.
That's right. Yeah, it's a Starbucks in the middle of Woodstock. Wait, what?
That's cool. I like that. Yeah, let's go with that. All right,
everybody. We will see you next week.
Yes, we will.
When our guest will be, you'll find out.
Right. Good night.
Bye.